Hi, my name's Tim Credeur, and I am a commercial business manager for ServPro of East Baton Rouge. Welcome to our weekly hurricane and emergency preparedness videos. On top of my daily tasks, I also travel regularly with the ServPro storm team. And over this last year, we have traveled all over the coast of South Louisiana, Alabama, Texas, Dallas, Houston, Florida, and seen a variety of storms, emergencies, natural disasters, and we've rendered help. ServPro does fire, water, and mold cleanup and restoration, along with a variety of other services. But another major service that we do is storm work. When things get really bad in a community because of a hurricane, a tornado, ServPro shows up and works to get that community back like it never even happened. Over the course of the last year, I've seen a number of things working on storms that could have been mitigated, minimized, many things that could have been prevented with proper preparedness. So this series of videos is really to help the community, anyone watching, prepare themselves for the potentiality of an emergency, a disaster, hurricane, tornado. Now, when we talk about emergency preparedness plans, an emergency preparedness plan is like a major umbrella. And the components of that plan would cover any type of disaster, whereas a hurricane preparedness plan would be more focused on a hurricane event, tornado preparedness plan more focused on a tornado event, earthquake preparedness plan focused more on an earthquake-based event. But an emergency preparedness plan is a larger plan focused on any emergency that may befall a home, a business, a house. And so having an emergency preparedness plan that kind of is a catch-all is extremely important, because many of the components found in an emergency preparedness plan are also found in the specific hurricane preparedness, flood preparedness. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to discuss some of the components of an emergency preparedness plan. I'm also going to include some of them in the text on this post, and I hope this helps. I hope this makes sense. I'm going to continue doing this weekly. You're welcome to comment. If you have any feedback, let me know. My goal here is to help as many of you in the community face this hurricane season, or whatever season you're going through, with as much knowledge as possible, and hopefully as much preparedness as possible, so that not only do we minimize any secondary damage to you and your family, but we make the process of you enduring these emergencies just a little bit easier and a little bit more comfortable. So without any longer introduction, let's get started. Emergencies happen oftentimes without very much notice. Hurricanes, oftentimes, it can go from pretty small to pretty big in 3 or 4 days. The good thing about hurricanes, we get a little more notice, right, than maybe a hurricane, a tornado, or an earthquake. Even a little more notice than flooding. Oftentimes, we know it's going to rain, but we don't necessarily assume that rain is going to equal my house is completely flooded. So hurricanes, we get a little bit more notice. But regardless, there are some things we want to make sure we have within our homes, even within our businesses, that can prepare us in the likelihood of major emergencies. One of those things is water. Water storage is extremely important in major emergencies, because oftentimes utility systems can get shut down or can get contaminated. And then the process of treating that water, the science of that and the specificity of that can be somewhat complex, especially for a layperson like myself. So the storage of potable water, clean water, fresh water, is extremely important. But very rarely do we see homes who have water stored up. And by stored up, I mean 10 large Kentwood bottles of water just waiting in the case of an emergency. You want to make sure you have approximately 7 to 10 days of water per person. So a person should drink about a gallon of water per day. So if you have a 5-member family, that's 5 gallons of water per day. 10 days, you would need about 50 gallons of stored water somewhere. 10-gallon tanks of water are pretty easy to come by. 10-gallon tanks to store water are pretty easy to find. What we don't often find is people who have it when an emergency happens. So water is extremely important. Can you treat water? Yes, you can treat water, but you get into some real weird things there. Some people treat water with bleach, 1/8 of a teaspoon of bleach per gallon of water. Some people treat water with iodine. I think it's very dangerous to start taking the treatment of water into your own hands if you're not a chemist or a licensed water and utility specialist. So my advice is to have stored water, 1 gallon per person in your family per day for approximately 10 days. Number one thing. Number two, food. I've got a list of some things that are great for emergencies, but you want to have at least 7 days of food per person. And you want to make sure those items are non-perishable. Things like protein or fruit bars, ready-to-eat canned meats, whether people like them or not, sardines, potted meat, Vienna sausages, Spam, those kinds of things are amazing for emergencies because their shelf life is much longer than lunch meat, and they have some sodium in them. And so sometimes in the middle of an emergency, it's hard to get all the sodium you need, but a lot of times those canned foods, those preserved foods will have sodium in them, sometimes too much. But in the case of an emergency, it can be great. Dry cereals, peanut butter, dried fruits, nuts, crackers, canned juices, non-perishable pasteurized milk, high energy foods, vitamins, baby food. If you have babies, as much formula as you can have, at least a 30-day window for a baby, because you're just not sure in an emergency how long it's going to take you to get to an open supermarket and buy more formula. So formula is crucial if you have a baby. And then obviously if you want to have some comfort foods and some stress foods, you're welcome to. I'd also suggest people to have, if you're going to have freezers that have a bunch of frozen food in them and frozen meats and stuff, which we have at our home, you must have a generator that can power those in the case of an emergency, right? You want to make sure that the generator you have can power the things that you need. So make sure that generator can handle a refrigerator, a freezer, an air conditioner, all those types of things. Very important. Some supplies that are crucial for all emergency preparedness plans are hand crank NOAA radios. NOAA is it's a national weather service that we use, the National Office of Atmospheric, I'm not exactly sure, but NOAA, NOAA. They make hand crank NOAA radios. What that means is it uses crank power to run instead of a battery. Super crucial because sometimes when there's a major emergency, you just don't know how long the power is going to be out. Obviously, flashlights are vital, but so are candles. Flashlights, candles, batteries, a whistle, and a first aid kit. First aid kits can be small. The larger they are, the more they'll do. But the larger your first aid kit, the more training you'll need. So I encourage anyone, if you want to be fully prepared, make sure you go to the Red Cross and get first aid CPR certified for adult and children. Everyone should do that. I do it every year. Your local Red Cross will have classes scheduled that you can go to get certified in CPR and in first aid. Some miscellaneous things I think are important. Have an extra cell phone. one of the best things to do, oftentimes you and your wife or you and your spouse or everyone in your home will have the same carrier, right? Everyone in my home has the same carrier. What I like to do with the emergency phones is go buy 3 or 4 emergency phones that use a different network than my current provider. For instance, if you have a T-Mobile phone, I would get an AT&T prepaid phone because maybe my AT&T phone's not working, but my T-Mobile temporary phone works because they use different networks. And sometimes one network will be down and the other network will be up. So if I were you, when I get emergency phones, I get phones that are contrary to my regular phone. That way, in the case of networks being down, I have the opportunity to hook up to a couple more networks. So that's always a good idea. Duct tape, scissors, tweezers, Vaseline, all those things are great miscellaneous items that can be used for millions of different things, right? If you're from South Louisiana, you know duct tape is right next to gumbo in terms of importance. So duct tape, very important. When it comes to medicines, anybody who's on any type of prescription, there should be something set aside specifically in the case of an emergency. So there is some reserve medicine for those people in the home, be that blood pressure medicine, heart medicine, whatever. But other than that, we should have some antacids, some aspirin, possibly some Pepto-Bismol, something for stomach because people get really nervous, and that can be an antidiuretic, or it could be potentially something that can combat constipation. So things like that are important. Common medicines that people may need. Sometimes in our society, we take those things for granted. And then in an emergency, when those things aren't open or we don't have access, those things can be life-giving. So make sure you have a stash of medicines that are important for you and your family. And then a couple things about potential damage to your home. We'll get more into this as we go in our videos into the hurricane preparedness plans. But if you have major damage to your home, the first thing you really want to do as soon as possible is go shut off the electrical main. Shut off the electrical main. And the reason for that, and a lot of people don't want to do that because they want the lights on, they want power, but the reason for that is when there's major damage to a structure, it's hard to understand where there are dangerous wiring issues or dangerous electrical issues. It's hard to understand where those are, and it's hard to see them, right? Especially if there's no lights and there's water. So that we can thwart any secondary damage coming to anyone, as soon as there's major damage to a structure, we want to shut the power off as quickly as possible and go to battery power, go to flashlights, until we can figure out, get someone there or get an inspection done so that there's no live wires in a bathroom or in an attic and water's dripping through and that water's electrified. Those scenarios can be very dangerous. So shut off the electrical, shut off the gas, and shut off the water if there is major damage. Because what happens is that gas keeps going and someone lights a candle and we've got a problem. No one shuts off the electrical. We start turning on lights. One person goes into a back room to grab something and there's water on the floor and there's electrical damage, and we've got an issue. Now we've got another larger problem. So shut all those things off if there's major damage to the structure. Always keep your tools handy. Saws, wrenches, axes, all these types of tools I keep very handy. I have a huge box of tools, and if a job comes or something needs to be done, I have tools, easy access. Always keep tools close, especially in the case of emergencies. Keep your tools close. And then another thing about shutting off the water main, shutting off the electrical, shutting off the gas, teach your family members how to do it. If dad's the only one who knows how to do everything and then dad gets injured in the storm, we've got a problem. Mom and the kids need to also understand, how do we shut off the water main? How do we shut off the power main? How do we shut off the gas main? Those things should be teachable moments for a family, so that your emergency readiness plan is not just about having things, it's also about having knowledge, spending time together and understanding what our plan is and what we need to do in the case of an emergency. If you turn the gas off at your home, keep it off. Don't turn the gas off and then think everything's okay and turn the gas back on. Gas leaks are very dangerous for people when they're sleeping, or obviously if we're using candles, gas can be very dangerous. So once a major event hits a facility and you turn the gas off, that gas does not need to be put back on until a licensed gas technician comes back out to the facility and clears everything. Other than that, it would just be an extremely dangerous scenario. So the last thing I want to cover when it comes to an emergency preparedness plan is having an evacuation plan. By evacuation plan, I mean, what are my evacuation routes? How do I get to the highway? How do I get out of here as quickly as possible? What do I need to know in terms of me getting to a safe place? If I have family in the area, have a meetup spot, local church. I would stay away from a Walmart parking lot because a lot of the people have the same idea. So I would look at meeting in a clinic parking lot, like a 24-hour walk-in clinic. Those are great. A lot of times they have emergency services there in the time. So if anyone's hurt, we meet in the parking lot of the emergency services place. And if anyone's hurt, we can get them taken care of quickly. Or a church parking lot. Those are also great places to meet as a family, discuss what needs to be done. Someone forgot their water, I got a couple extra gallons, and then we can get everybody on the road and we can get everybody evacuated. Those are the basics of an emergency preparedness plan: water, food, supplies, miscellaneous, drugs or medicines, and then what to do in the case of damage to the structure. And lastly, evacuation plan. I hope that made sense to you. I hope you enjoyed it. I know my video was a little long, but if everything made sense, let me know, leave a comment, and we'll be doing another one next Wednesday. I hope you have a great day. Be safe, and if you ever need anything, give us a call at ServPro. We'll make sure it looks like nothing ever happened.